Taylor is a very, very cool person that I connected with in Soho House, Canada. And he was leading the mentorship showcase, which I found fascinating because I spoke at the mentorship showcase here in London when I was doing the Soho mentorship program. So it's just amazing how we've lived somewhat parallel lives. And I'm really excited to get into a bit more about what that is and, how it has been for you growing up Black biracial in Canada, and then comparing and contrasting that with my experience as a Black Brit. So, without further ado, I've been yapping a bit. I'm gonna let you go ahead and introduce yourself, Taylor. Who is Taylor? What's your story? And how did you become who you are today?
Yeah, okay, let's do it. Well, first of all, thank you for that intro, and it feels great to be here, so I appreciate you having me on this platform. For those who don't know, my name is Taylor Patterson. I'm a multi-hyphenate artist who I guess specializes in hosting, content creation, filmmaking in the city. I also have I specialize in events as well, and I'm based in Toronto. But I also have some British heritage. My mom is a Brit, and so I'm sure we'll get into race and my background shortly. But it definitely sprawls, and so there's probably more in common that we have than you think.
Okay, yeah, I definitely didn't know that. So I'm really excited to hear about the family background. So yeah, I guess we can start there. Like you've described yourself as a biracial multi-hyphenate artist. How did that identity play out for you as you grew up in Toronto? Assuming that's where you grew up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So to give you some of the lore, my dad is Canadian, Italian, Danish, whatever, born and raised in Canada, and my mom is Jamaican, one of 10 children, but was born in the UK. My grandmother decided to be a part of the Windrush generation, which, was basically Commonwealth countries, mainly the Caribbean, coming over during the 60s, whatever, to take advantage of all the incentives that were being displaced or put on by the UK. So my grandmother moved over, brought half of her Jamaican children, so first five, and then the second five were born in the UK, and my mom is the youngest of 10. Nine women, I got, yeah, nine women, one uncle. I got eight black aunties, which is insane. And there's about 50 grandchildren and cousins and whatever. So it's a huge family. That said, my mom did something similar, and a couple of her other sisters as well moved to Canada to take advantage of the incentives that were being put on, by Trudeau and all the people here in Canada. And so she moved here, had five children, so half as much as my grandmother. And I am fourth, so I'm the fourth born. But it's really hard to explain to people sometimes, especially in Canada, what that looks like. Because I'll be like, I'm Jamaican. We grow up with Jamaican heritage and culture and the stuff that practices and traditions. But also, my mom was born in the UK, and has, other traditions that were implemented, British traditions. She describes herself as, very British at heart in terms of how she looks at things and her ideologies. And then you come to Canada, and I'm born here, and I have my own set of ideologies, set from just growing up here as well. And so, I mean, I am very racially ambiguous, which I am very self-aware of and acknowledge. And it just goes to show how complex and intricate people are in today's day. You might look at me and think, I mean, most people think I'm Spanish, or, yeah, I even get Filipino sometimes, whatever it is. But it's just an interesting mix because, as time progresses, everybody's complexions just become more and more intricate and mixes that have never existed. For example, my mom is black, and my dad is white. My dad is a ginger. He's like the whitest guy on the planet. Um, so that in itself is a mix that you actually isn't portrayed very commonly in media. I mean, typically people say that you black fathers and white women or whatever it is. But I have a black British mom with a British accent and a very, very, fair-skinned father, which is not popular to see in Canada. It might be different in the UK. I definitely, when I go over there, I do see more people who look like myself. But here, it is definitely not the case.
Wow. You know the online trend slash joke about ginger being the new black? I'm just saying,
Yeah,
it adds up. So are you really biracial?
so funny.
I'm kidding, guys.
I
Don't
know.
kill me.
I know.
Um,
I always say I'm a half black, half ginger, and that always gets a laugh.
I love that for you. I love that for you. No, that's so funny. But wow, it sounds like your family reunions will be so lit. Oh my goodness. And what
Yeah, that's one word to describe it. Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot that goes on, but I think for me, what was most interesting about that story, thank you for sharing, by the way, is just that connection with Windrush that I haven't heard before and I haven't thought about before because when I hear Windrush, I just immediately think of the Jamaicans and Caribbeans that came to the UK and settled here. I didn't think about how Windrush also affected other countries like Canada. And I guess it makes sense of the similarities between the UK and Canada in terms of Black culture, because I was so shook when I went to Toronto and I'm hearing the same slang that I grew up with in London
Yes.
but with just an American adjacent accent. That was so wild to me. And it makes sense because, Black British culture is very, very uh shaped by Jamaican culture and Nigerian, but especially Jamaican. And I think the same can be said probably of maybe Black Canadian culture or maybe specifically Black Toronto culture. Um, and maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, I'm happy you picked up on that because I think and I hate to bring this up because I've brought this up so many times, but when you start to see blackness discussed in popular media, such as the big rap battle that happened last year between Drake and Kendrick Lamar, a lot of these topics were kind of addressed in what it means to be black and how it and what yeah, basically how it comes across to be black in today's day. And what it means to be black in Canada is a lot different than what it means to be black in the States. I mean, I definitely did not grow up in the States. I have general history, but I think a lot of people there, due to slavery and a very complex and intricate history, are separated from exactly the traditions and culture that their ancestors had, before arriving to the US. And in Canada, and I think in the UK, it's very integral. I mean, we in Canada, we call ourselves a mosaic, so we're built of a whole bunch of different cultures that make up who we are in Canada. And one of those things is Caribbean. I mean, Toronto especially is very heavily focused on its Caribbean history. I mean, we have areas and neighborhoods that are completely dedicated to Caribbean cultures, Little Jamaica, whatever you say, and so on and so forth. Caravana, our Carnival experience here is one of the biggest in the world. Our food is extremely complex. People always say Toronto has some of the best food in the world because you can come here and eat, Ethiopian food, Jamaican food, whatever it is, Chinese food, all that
I
stuff.
agree with
And so, yes, our food scene is incredible, and will always people will come here to experience it. And so, I think. the idea of what it means to be black in Canada is sometimes misconstrued or compared to the States, and it is very different. I mean, yeah, the way we talk, our lingo, Toronto slang, which has become a huge thing in the last 5 years, is very inspired. It's just patois with some Ethiopian words. I think you said in the UK it's like half Nigerian. Ours is like half Ethiopian. And so yeah, I mean, it's very different. And most Black people who live in Toronto or in Canada, their parents are either strictly or born in the Caribbean and have moved here, or perhaps grandparents. But it's a huge force here in the city, so a little bit different.
Yeah, that is so interesting. And I think when I came, I was very aware of the fact that I know little about Black Canadian history. And I was also aware that it's obvious that Canadians or Black Canadians, especially, are very different to Black Americans. And also, I'm just always curious about the Black experience wherever Black people are. And so I did pick up a children's book. Where it is, don't ask me, but I picked it up, I flicked through it, and eventually when I find it, I'll go through it again. But what I do remember, and this is something that I had learned of years ago, anyways, is about especially areas of Canada like Nova Scotia and how slaves were taken to Nova Scotia kind of as a reward for fighting for the British loyalists, I believe. So I think, yeah, there's a very, very interesting history to Black people being in Canada. And then also there is the nuance of those who are Black and Native. I met someone who is both Black and Native in Toronto, and she told me about that experience, and that was just fascinating. There's just so many different layers at play.
Yeah, it really is like they say, we're not a melting pot, we're a mosaic. So we have so many different cultures here in Canada. That said, primarily across, from east to west, it is, very Caucasian, and but there are central points. I would say Toronto in the greater Toronto area is definitely has a huge Black community, but it's still young, and so I think in generations to come we'll see a lot stronger Black presence across, some of our other provinces that aren't so. Um, but we are definitely seeing a shift in our media and in our culture that is definitely becoming more Black focused, which is great.
I love that for you. And I love how you describe it as a mosaic rather than a melting pot. What do you think is the difference between those two, and how does that show in Canada?
Yeah, so it's actually something that we get taught like in our classrooms, and those two words exactly. US is a melting pot in the sense that when you become an American, you give up all of your history or culture beforehand, I mean, to a degree, and you become an American citizen. So you pick up on their cultures and their traditions and things that they do and their history and what makes them American. Where in Canada, we are very focused on the sense that everybody brings their culture to the table and we recognize and celebrate all those cultures. And that's what makes the painting. So a mosaic is a bunch of different colors or textures or whatever. And when you zoom out, it makes a bigger picture. And so that's what Canada is. So it's very pocket driven. You'll go to different areas that are completely different. And it has pros and cons. The pros are that you can find your community here, and we're so diverse. Like our food scene, you come and you can try a whole bunch of different foods. In a place where it lacks, in my personal opinion, is our media. It's very hard to have shows that are successful or movies that are successful because they might only pertain to a small, acute audience. So we'll have shows that have been around for a while on our broadcasting works, but they are really hokey shows that, pertain to a very white, central, rural type demographic, because that is the majority, where we're just starting to see some more urban and black focused, content coming out of Toronto. But still, Toronto isn't a big enough market to apply to Canada. Canada is one of the biggest countries in the world, but our demographic is actually quite small compared to the States. The States has like 300 million people. We have, like 40 million. So it's hard to sometimes cater our art forms to like our demographic.
That is a perfect segue into the discussion about black being black in Toronto in Canada as well, but in the context of media. And I was going to ask you about visibility and invisibility, but you've already answered it. And I think you answered it in such a way that is very, very intriguing because I must admit that I don't think about this enough. And I think that is as a result of American dominance in global black portrayal, I would say. I think the two main images that I had really on screen were, the American ghetto and the African poverty scenario. It's either people shooting themselves up in the hood or children with flies on their face. Those were the two extremes. And obviously, I'm exaggerating. I did watch things like That So Raven, etc. But just in terms of the major portrayals of Black people on a global level, that tended to be the binary growing up. And so as someone who works in media and content, how do you think media tends to frame Black stories in general and then specifically in Canada?
Yeah, I'll speak to the Canadian part first. Sometimes because Toronto is so close to the States, I mean, we basically border Buffalo and we basically border New York. Toronto itself does often see itself as, very parallel to the US's ideals in terms of their media and their culture. One of the things that we don't do as well as the UK or I guess many other countries out there is we don't really have a strong support system to support our own media. So this our own films, our own television shows. We've done a good job in our music sector thanks to Drake and The Weeknd and all these other big superstars, Justin Bieber, you name it. But in other factors, in other sectors, it's been a little bit of an uphill battle. And yes, we are starting to see like a change, which is great. But we do look to the States for all of our media. So it's like people rather go on and watch a US created show than watch a Canadian show. And there is good reasoning for that. I mean, in a lot of cases, it's significantly better and higher budget. But one thing I do like about the UK is you guys have such a prospering like theater system, and you have your own UK celebrities, British comedians, and you do a good job of supporting those people as well. I know you guys are also definitely influenced by the states' exports, but it is a better system. That said, let me try and remember your first part of the question.
So how do you think that media frames Black stories?
Um, I will say, compared to some other countries like the States, it is a better system here in terms of how, how we can share Black stories and celebrate Black stories. We have a lot of different people expressing themselves through the narrative or expressing their own narratives, which I think is important. Um, I think it's a little bit different in the States because you have such strong, different, polarizing opinions, where I think in Canada it is extremely diverse. And so, though we are still victim to, stereotypes or some, um, not the correct narratives, I think there's still, I think we do a better job than, something like the States, which has such opposing, divided culture, which is good. And that doesn't mean that there isn't, room for improvement, but I do think we do a decent job in our media coverage.
Oh, for sure. And just to quickly circle back to the Drake and Justin Bieber thing, one thing I learned in Toronto
Yeah.
is you guys do not play about Drake. I feel like I came out of this bubble where Kendrick Lamar, Not Like Us was playing, and then I set foot on the land of maple leaves, and not once did I hear that song played. So I've learned to tread carefully, literally, when it comes to Drake, because you guys are so protective of him. It's hilarious. But yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I can't speak for everybody, but a lot of us are huge Drake fans. I mean, he did a lot for our city and still has and still does. He chooses to live here. He doesn't live in the States, doesn't live in LA or New York, whatever it is. Like he literally, you'll see him at restaurants and, venues and stuff like that. And so it's important to have someone like that representing the city when even other celebrities like, Justin Bieber and The Weeknd and other, mega uh, actors that have come out of Hollywood and stuff, they don't necessarily represent the city the same way he does. So he's definitely cherished for sure.
Fair enough. I had no idea he was still running through the six.
Yes, big
His
time.
balls. No, lovely. So I'd love to hear a bit more about those competing narratives, especially as someone who has a mosaic of an identity in yourself, being Black, being Canadian, but also being biracial. And do you ever find yourself caught between those different aspects of your identity?
Yeah, definitely every day is a bit of a toss up and a question I ask myself. I'm very fortunate that I'm extremely self-aware. So my Black experience isn't the same as another person's Black experience in Canada. I definitely cannot speak solely on the Black experience in Canada because I'm not fully Black, and I also am very self-aware that I don't present. Some people are kind of sometimes confused as to what my background is. Most people are confused. So with that, I don't have the same experience as the average Black person in Canada. So I can only speak to my experience, which is I did grow up in a very, even though I wasn't affluent or privileged, I did grow up in a very privileged neighborhood in Toronto that was very heavily white and Caucasian populated. That was the demographic. I grew up thinking, that I was a very unique situation in terms of being Black and biracial and having that culture. I went to elementary school and high school, and even university, because I went to university with many of the same people I went to high school with, thinking that I was, one of the Black kids. I was one of the darkest people that I knew, and I was always addressed that way. And it wasn't until after university and when I started working in journalism that I started to embrace all the other cultures and areas and kind of learn that there is such a rich Black community here in the city that I wasn't privy to. And so growing up, though I had a very rich Black family, I'm rich in the sense of there's so many of us, it's ridiculous. Outside of that, in terms of my friends and the media that I was watching and absorbing and all that stuff was very white focused. And I just thought that was the case in Toronto. But as I got older, I'm very fortunate that through journalism, I was able to, get more acquainted with areas like Scarborough, Eglinton, Little Jamaica, cover huge Black festivals, showcase Black entrepreneurs and small businesses. And it kind of helped me regain my access to Black culture, which has been great and still an ongoing, pursuit.
No, I'm sure. And I would love to hear you speak a bit more about your time in the journalist sector or your experience in the media and creative sectors overall. Would you say that there have been any specific microaggressions or any type of structural barriers that either you personally faced or people around you faced?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I will say that we have come such a far way, even in the last 5 years, in terms of how much opportunity there is for Black creators, artists. I don't even know if it's like this in other countries, but I do feel that more than ever, there are so many opportunities if Black for Black artists and creatives in all these different areas to get involved in programs and opportunities. A lot of this came out of, of course, 2020, but we've also just done a decent job with supplying programs and initiatives for people of racialized backgrounds. But in the last few years, especially, I think it has become a much better playing ground, and giving people equal opportunities, which is amazing. That said, of course, there's always going to be microaggressions and hypocrisy. And when we as a nation look to the states and absorb their media and how their ideologies sometimes and their philosophies, that sometimes does cross the border, and we start to acknowledge that and embrace some of those faux pas. And it is a fine line. I always just say that in terms of journalism, what it comes down to is doing your research and not spreading any sort of hypocrisy or double standards. I think that's where it gets a little bit muddy. Just being very clear that when you're telling a story, is this shaped on fact, or is this shaped based off of some, earlier, some sort of earlier idea or concept, and not really, does the same story apply to all people? I think the main thing when it comes to journalism is just really outlining, is this hypocrisy? Is this a double standard? And I think we actually are getting better at that, addressing that, which is good.
Yeah, I'm thinking about maybe in the last few years of two newspaper headlines, front page side by side. And I think it was basically stories that were similar, but one had, a black person on it, and then the other had a white person. I might even be simplifying it too much. It might have been even a story about, you know, Princess Kate versus Princess Meghan and how they were individually portrayed by the same paper, granted different writers, but nevertheless the same paper, and side by side you could just see just the bias in making Megan out to be I say Megan like she's my homegirl. Sorry. But like, just making her out to be just something other than who she is, but being super, super generous in terms of compliments for Princess Kate. So yeah, that's what came to mind, and I think you've spoken well on the responsibility that, journalists have, and I wonder if you think that responsibility extends now to others in the wider media space. It's evolving as we speak, and now we have content creators and
Yep.
I wonder what responsibility you think that new media uh, artists, if we want to put it that way, have when covering uh, racialized stories, whether that's, violence, police brutality, injustices, or just everyday life.
Yeah, I think honestly, it definitely extends itself to not even just media, but to everybody. I mean, that is our duty to be able to, if you call yourself an ally, to do all this stuff, is to call out. You don't have to be uh, a freedom fighter and go out of your way and adjust, your lifestyle, but there is a lot of double standards and hypocrisy in journalism, and the stories in which that we read every day, that we scroll past sensationalist concepts and stories that are put in front of our faces every day. And it's your job as this intelligent intellectual to identify the hypocrisy and to call it out, like to go out of your way to definitely identify, how the media goes after Caitlin Clark instead of Angel Reese. There's a whole bunch of different stuff, and I wanted to bring this up later, but there's a great episode of Atlanta when they kind of identify um, how life would be if Justin Bieber was black, and it's like one of their famous episodes. Um, that's all we have to do is just to acknowledge and identify situations like that.
That was a really interesting point that you were making, and what comes to mind is especially media outlets traditionally, um, they're driven by telling compelling stories. And I wonder what you think the difference is between telling a story that's compelling versus if I could say it, sensationalizing trauma.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we, the consumer and the audience, can only be blamed for the sensationalist um, obsession that we're seeing, saturation that we're seeing. It's because we, as the human race and audience, do tend to click or watch things that have insane, sensationalized headlines. It makes sense. I mean, if that's just how clickbait works. It's just unfortunate that we live in a time where it's gotten so saturated and so far on the other side of the spectrum that we can't it's kind of created this numbness, which is a weird place to be in when we are getting our facts and our information about the world, but everything is super heightened. And when you do that, you start to, yeah, become numb to the stories that exist. And it's not just hard news, it's anything. It's like pop culture. It's everything that we scroll past is just insane. And then when everything's insane, you can't realize what's justified or not. And so I think there is a difference. I think there are people likely out there making compelling stories or writing factual narratives, but we're not seeing it because the sensationalist stuff is what is going to the top of our news feeds due to algorithms, right? So I don't know what the solution is. Um, I think as time progresses, we're starting to see a shift of people starting to, one, not take everything with a grain of salt, especially with the rise of AI. People are just not believing everything that they're reading or seeing. And two, we're also starting to see a migration of people off these platforms and starting to maybe not be on these social media because it's just too overbearing. It's just too stimulating. One thing I was having this conversation with an artist, yes, 2 days ago. We are starting to see, and it's heavily being sparked by the states, is everything seems to be the onus seems to be on the consumer. So we've seen it for a very long time in terms of food consumption in the States. You can eat whatever you like. You can eat fast food, fried chicken, but drink sodas that are this big. And that onus is on you. There are tons of insane chemicals that are in that processed food that might give you cancer. We're not going to tell you what's in it or, put any sort of laws or barriers so that people can't have it, but the onus is on you. Then we see people like Trump trying to do the same thing with medication. They can make a lot of money off medication. They can put a whole bunch of chemicals into whatever ingredients into whatever they're making, right? And the onus is on you is that if you want to take that, I don't know, what's the thing that people are making? Everyone's making everyone's skinny right now. The obesity stuff, the diabetes stuff that is making everybody skinny. Ozempic. If you want to take Ozempic, it makes you skinny, but we don't know what the repercussions of that might be in 20 years. So the onus is on you. And we've been seeing that a lot with our media as well. We're putting out a whole bunch of stuff, some of it even from the White House, but it's not based in fact. And the onus is on you to actually read into it and decipher what is true and what isn't anymore. So as we start to progress down this like really survivalist, independent, autonomous type of society, it's a little bit scary because all the provisions that the government used to provide is now kind of being, I don't know, is not truthful or validated. And so now it's on you to kind of figure out how the life you want to live. And some people are probably on board for that. And I know a lot of people who aren't educated like you and I and aren't having these conversations, it might not be the best case scenario for them. So, all I can recommend is that people stay learned, stay learning, and get out there and, read some books.
You're right. There is a lot happening in the world, a lot of change all at once, and it can be overwhelming. Because I'm just thinking about how many times that I've heard that, the future is personalized and, everything is going to be tailored to the customer and their needs and their wants and their desires. But, at the same time, we are being, I don't want to say burdened, but a lot of the responsibility is falling on the consumer and the customer. And I think perhaps not enough attention is being given to the fact that these these producers, these companies are actively enforcing or reinforcing those patterns. I know, especially with social media, like it's designed to be addictive. So yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of sharing of responsibility that has to be done there. But with that said, when it comes to media and storytelling, I know we've spoken a lot about how it can potentially be harmful, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on the role that media and stories can have when it comes to healing.
Obviously, with all the bad comes good as well. I mean, there are so many times where I have watched a show or a film or something that has influenced a culture in significant ways. And there are a lot of people out there who have done so. In the States, you have people like Donald Glover and Jordan Peele, and people who are using cinema to address certain situations. Even in the movie that just came out, the Paul Thomas Anderson movie, One Battle After Another, it does talk a lot about race and about the philosophies that are happening right now in Western culture. So with that, these platforms can definitely be used for good. Same with journalism specifically. There are a lot of platforms and networks that do their best to put out researched, intelligent material. The problem is us. It's how we consume it because we just seem to consume the stuff that's the most sensationalized or is top of our news feeds, and so it might be harder to find out and go out and find these platforms or subscribe to them because you as the consumer has to go out and do that. It's not being served to you on a plate, but at the end of the day, that's kind of what life's all about. I mean, you have to go out there and make those choices and do those actions and put yourself out there, do the research. Otherwise, you'll be served something that isn't quality.
What kinds of boundaries do you implement for yourself when it comes to your mental health?
Oh,
And
I wish I implemented more, to be honest. Um, But two things that I've been doing more recently, just in the last couple months, is exercising on a very scheduled basis. I was someone who, worked out here and there and, played some recreational sports. But in the last couple months, I've been really trying to stick to a regimented, fitness program, which has been really good for my mental health. And the second thing is meditation. Again, I would meditate here and there throughout the year, but now I pretty much do it every other day or every weekday or every work day. So that's been something that's really helped. And when I was younger, I think I would do it, but I wouldn't necessarily see the benefits. And now I'm at the point now where I kind of crave it. Like yesterday, I was feeling really anxious from having too much tea, honestly. And I was like, I need to sit down and meditate. And it really helps me. It's like Jerry Seinfeld says that it's like your mind taking a bath, which is super helpful. And so those are the kind of like the two practices that I'm doing right now. And they seem to be working. It's good.
that's hilarious. I hadn't thought about it like that, but yeah, I need to take more mental baths, honestly.
Yeah, it helps.
Yeah, because it's really important to wash your legs, literally.
Exactly.
Gotta wash the mental legs as well.
Yes,
And
exactly.
rest them. But yeah, okay, that's wonderful to hear, and it's a great reminder of just the importance of constantly doing these things. You don't get to look after yourself one time and try and stretch that out. You don't take a bath one time, hopefully not.
Yeah.
Keep showering, keep taking a bath. Um, so I'd love to come back to who you are as a multi-hyphenate artist and as a creator. And I'd love to, first of all, to hear more about what it is you do. And then secondly, to hear how you do it while staying true to who you are and the principles that you live by.
Yeah. So what do I mean, I do a bunch of stuff and I always wish I could just pinpoint it to one or two things, but um primarily I'm a host, and that entails interviews and red carpet stuff. Do a lot of interviews and hosting. I did it primarily uh as a journalist for one of our biggest, lifestyle publications here in the city. And so I was kind of known as the face of that publication here for maybe 4 years. And then come May, I realized that I had made enough connections and had built a platform that I was able to go in on my own and become a freelance host, interviewer, content creator, filmmaker, and all these things. And I've been very, I guess, blessed to have the ability to fluctuate between, 4 or 5 different roles and support myself, which has been great. So, outside of hosting and doing the content creation and stuff, I make a lot of short films. I'm developing a TV show here in Canada. I'm a, radio personality. I've been a recurring host on Sirius XM for the last couple months. I have my own event company. We throw parties around the city. I lead the mentorship program at the Soho House. I do some of their programming there. I sit on their committee. Um, I'm an actor assigned to an agency. I'm a writer, and so I've just always been attracted to many different facets of creativity, and I've never really wanted to be, I don't know, siloed with just one. And when you can jump between them, it is a great liberty, and also you can kind of, I don't know, you can kind of stack them in a way that allows you to benefit, from each. So that's where I'm at right now.
Goodness me. I've
Sure.
immediately just filed you into a certain folder, and I'll explain. In Nigerian culture, when someone is doing really well and they're doing a lot of things, and that person is recognized by your parent, some Nigerian parents love to make comparisons between their child and that person who is the overachiever. But how they phrase it, Nigerian culture being a culture of exaggeration, is through a very poignant question, which is, does Taylor have two heads? And the question is designed to just strip you of any pride you had in yourself and basically make you want to get it together. And sometimes, you know,
That's hilarious.
sometimes it's people having two heads, but I've recently realized that there are certain category of people who have three heads. And I think I'm gonna file you under that category. But I love that for you. That's amazing that you are doing all of those things. And I'm similar, like I've never just had one interest. Um, you know, maybe that's me being neurodivergent. I'm always curious about 100 things at once, but it's also about finding the discipline to see those ideas through. But it sounds like you're doing a great job. And I guess for anyone who is listening to this conversation who has multiple interests, just some quick tips for, making a living out of those multiple things.
Yeah. First of all, I think that's hilarious with the two heads thing. I actually wrote that down because I love that. It's something my mom or my grandmother would say for sure. But yeah, in order to, I mean, I think I'm I think it's a great strategy when becoming a creative to be able to lean on different strengths. I mean, in terms of acting, I mean, I'll wait months before I book another commercial or book an acting gig. And if I wasn't making any money outside of that, I'd be dead. So, you need to have these other facets that can contribute to your income. And what happens when you do that is you start to build momentum. And so, if I was just waiting for an acting gig to say yes to me and to accept me, I would be so far and few between for my milestones, and it wouldn't feel like I was propelling myself forward. And in order to be a creative, you need to be really confident and you need to believe in yourself and your trajectory. And so when you have a whole bunch of different things that you can bounce off of and bounce momentum off of, milestones that you can kind of yeah, bounce off of, it allows you to progress further and it feels like you're getting further in your career. Now, I will say when you do this, it does feel a little bit like you're a jack of all trades, master of none in some ways, which can also be a little bit disheartening because there might be one pursuit that you really want to pursue more than, the other ones, and you might be moving up in a certain one where you're like, I kind of really actually wanted to be a singer, and I haven't been singing that much. And so, like you said, it does come down to discipline and continually feeding, being I don't know, acknowledging the path that you're on and realizing what discipline that you need to feed primarily at this moment in time. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. I do kind of sometimes think I'm like, okay, I'm doing this very well, but I'm starting to be known as this guy, and I need to start doing this more often to balance that out. That said, for those who are like trying to make a living and trying to do more creative stuff, I think um yeah, like just do your best to join community and meet other people and to learn not just one thing, but to learn a bunch of things because as we said, we're headed to a life that seems to be super independent and autonomous. I mean, we're starting to see the entire Hollywood film system be shrunk down to content creators on YouTube. People are literally making feature films that are going on YouTube, and with AI, that's going to be the new thing. And we see journalism. It's happening at tons in Canada. Publications that are huge that have, a whole bunch of employees that are now just people with iPhones who talk to their camera and they're journalists. So everything is shrinking, everything is becoming cheaper to make, and the more diverse of a skill set that you have to offer, the further you're going to go. So that would be my advice.
I feel encouraged and called out all at the same time. I definitely need to apply a lot of what you said. I've been thinking about that a lot actually, where I feel I do love public speaking. I do hosting as well, and I love to chair panels and stuff like that. But writing is my first love, and it's been so hard for me to get into that space because writing is a craft of stillness. And when you're up and down all over the place, you can't be still. And if you can't be still, you can't write because you can't think. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna watch this back and use it as a point of reflection and journaling. So thank you for that.